The rain tapped lightly against the window, a steady rhythm that usually lulled me to sleep. But tonight was different. Tonight, every sound seemed sharper, every shadow more pronounced. I was sprawled across my single bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the tension in my chest. She had arrived unexpectedly, soaking wet from the sudden downpour. Her clothes clung to her, darkened by rain, and her hair hung in damp strands across her face. I barely had time to react before she asked, her voice quiet but hesitant. "Can I sleep in your bed tonight?" I blinked, taken aback. My first instinct was to point to the spare blanket on the chair or the couch. But I only had one bed. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I only have one bed," I replied. She hesitated, and I could see the uncertainty flicker across her features. Then, without another word, she simply stepped inside. There was no pretense, no awkwardness, just an unspoken understanding. She needed shelter. I needed calm. And yet, the air between us felt electric, charged with something neither of us could name. We moved around each other like dancers, trying to keep a polite distance, but the room was small, and boundaries were impossible to maintain. She sat on the edge of the bed, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. I sat on the opposite side, trying to focus on the book I had abandoned minutes earlier, but my eyes kept drifting toward her. Every rustle of the blanket, every small movement she made, seemed amplified in the quiet room. My heart pounded as I realized I wasn't just nervous for her comfort. I was aware of her presence in a way I hadn't anticipated. It was intoxicating, confusing, and a little frightening. Hours passed. The rain continued its steady drum against the glass, but sleep never came. I listened to her breathing, soft and uneven, and wondered how she managed to seem so calm when I felt anything but. I traced patterns on the sheets absent-mindedly, trying to convince myself that it was just the storm outside, the cramped space, the fatigue, but I knew the truth. It was the nearness of her, the way she fit awkwardly yet perfectly in the same small bed, that kept me awake. And so I lay there alert and restless, wondering how a single night could stretch so long, how a simple invitation could stir something I wasn't ready to name, and how I was going to survive the rest of it without losing control. The night stretched on, heavy with silence and the occasional patter of rain against the window. Every time I thought I might drift off, I felt her shift slightly under the blanket, and my mind snapped awake. There was no malice in it, no intention to tease, just the natural movements of someone trying to get comfortable. And yet for me, each subtle sound felt magnified. She rolled onto her side, facing away from me. I told myself it was nothing, just the way people sleep. But my chest tightened, my thoughts refused to settle. The closeness was dizzying, the warmth of her body so near that it made my skin prickle. I tried counting backwards, imagining the storm outside, anything to distract myself, but nothing worked. Finally, unable to resist, I spoke softly. "Are you okay?" She turned her head slightly, her damp hair falling across her cheek, and gave me the faintest smile. "Yeah, just a little cold," she admitted. I got up quickly, embarrassed. My feet shuffled on the hardwood floor as I grabbed the extra blanket from the chair. My hands trembled slightly, and I cursed myself silently. It was just a blanket. Nothing more. I draped it over her shoulders, letting my fingers brush hers as I did so. She didn't flinch. Instead, she looked up at me with a quiet, unspoken gratitude that made my heart thump painfully. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded, unsure what else to say. Words felt heavy, inadequate. I climbed back into my side of the bed, careful not to close the gap entirely, careful to give her space, yet aware of how close we now were. The room felt smaller than before, the air thick with something I couldn't name. Hours passed, and sleep still eluded me. I could hear her breathing, steadying itself after the storm, and I realized that the sound alone was enough to keep me awake. My thoughts twisted. How was it possible that a single night, a single bed, and a simple act of kindness could make me so restless, so aware, so utterly unprepared for what I was feeling? I lay there, eyes open, heart racing, wondering how a casual invitation, one that seemed so innocent at the time, had turned into a night of restless longing, quiet tension, and impossible anticipation. And I knew, even as I closed my eyes for a moment, that I wasn't ready for the morning, for the questions it would bring, or for the feelings I could no longer deny. The first light of dawn seeped through the curtains, soft and almost golden, but I still hadn't slept. Every small sound, the rustle of sheets, the creak of the floorboards, the distant chirping of birds, kept me on edge. She was still there, lying quietly under the blanket, and for a moment I just watched her, memorizing the calmness in her face, the way her hair fell messily across the pillow. Finally she stirred, rolling slightly toward me. My pulse jumped involuntarily, and I reminded myself to breathe. "Morning already?" she whispered, her voice low, still rough from sleep. I nodded, trying to sound casual, though my throat felt dry. "Yeah, night went fast." She gave a small laugh, barely audible, and I felt something warm bloom in my chest. The room felt smaller than ever now, but the tension wasn't uncomfortable. It was real, tangible, a connection that neither of us had expected. She stretched slightly and looked at me directly for the first time since she'd arrived. "I hope I didn't make things awkward," she said softly, almost nervously. I shook my head, surprised at how easily my words came. "Not at all. It was fine." There was a pause, long enough for the silence to become heavy, and then she leaned closer, brushing her hand briefly against mine. It was just a touch, fleeting, but the electricity in that moment made me acutely aware of everything between us, the closeness, the warmth, the unspoken tension. "Thank you," she whispered again, looking down, then back at me, "for letting me stay." I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. "You don't need to thank me," I said quietly. "I'm glad you're safe." We stayed like that for a few moments, the weight of the night settling around us. Finally, she sat up, shaking her damp hair free, and I realized how much the night had changed something in both of us, something unspoken, undeniable and fragile. "I should go," she murmured, though she didn't move immediately. "Yeah," I said, my voice low. But maybe we can talk again." Her smile was faint but genuine. "I'd like that." She gathered her things and left, stepping into the soft morning light. I remained on the bed, finally letting out a slow breath, heart still racing. The storm had passed, the night was over, but the memory of it and the closeness we'd shared lingered. And I knew, deep down, that neither of us would forget this night anytime soon.